A very good afternoon, everybody. Welcome again to a very special edition of Friday Drinks that's actually sponsored by CZI because they're actually having their annual conference, which they have once a year. And this year, the topic is a very interesting one. It's on sustainability. How can the business environment and business people, how can they integrate and ensure that they're sustainable as far as the environment is concerned and governance and all those issues. And we have a very special guest, somebody who's actually a friend of the show and who's having a Zambezi. Sekai, welcome.
Thank you very much, Friday Drinks. And I'm happy to have a Zambezi. Yes.
Last time you were having wine, and then I think the one time you shared a whiskey with Rufaro, and now it's Zambezi.
Well, Delta is sponsoring.
You're downgrading.
No.
Last time I was having a Castle Light. Yes.
Okay.
And then I had wine in between.
Yeah.
Now it's back to Delta beverages.
Well, you're supporting local, which is very important. But tell us a little bit more about your conference. You have this annual events. I think we've attended quite a number, but this one seems well attended. And I like everything that you said. Your panelists and your guests are some of the best in the world.
Yes. So thanks very much for inviting me. Annually we do an annual conference, and our conferences are usually very policy focused. So we have paid a lot of attention to the policy side of things and not so much to the enterprise and professional side of things. And we believe that these are complementary. We need to do policy, but we also need to do professional development and enterprise competitiveness initiatives, which is why we have created this conference now, which is called the SIF, Strategic Intelligence Forum. And it's coming differently. We will have a separate conference a separate breakfast meeting rather for the policy, as a policy conference, to address policy issues. But we felt that we really needed now to do some initiatives that would equip managers, executives, entrepreneurs, and various teams to be more innovative and to drive growth and competitiveness at enterprise level.
Okay, let's get into the nomenclature. What's a pre-conference? Because that's what this is.
So the pre-conference was our clever way of saying that this is happening before everything else is happening. And it was mainly because our facilitator for the masterclass for sustainability is actually a global consultant who was only available this week, and we couldn't miss that opportunity. So we then had a separate conference, and we thought it was also a good opportunity to give people a bit of a teaser in terms of the quality of the content and conversations that we are going to be having next week by having a very high-level conference before the main conference.
Okay. And our audience are 6-year-olds. So when you say Strategic Intelligence Forum, what does that actually mean?
What it actually means is that we are trying to address areas of strategic importance to business that would inform strategy, that would inform business models, that would inform product innovation, and generally the way we do business, and the way we lead our businesses. What are the key issues that are of importance to our business leaders at the moment? And these are drawn from, we have spoken a lot about VUCA, we've spoken a lot about mega trends, but we've spoken about them more than we have done something about them at strategy level. So what we are trying to do is to then bring actionable tools and methods and insights that would equip people to actually address VUCA and address the mega trends.
We have a resident 6-year-old. Let's ask him. Does this actually make sense to you?
No, I think she's articulated it quite well. I think, entrepreneurs in our country, because of the difficulty and challenges that we have, are quite dynamic and nimble. And I think it makes sense to actually pay more attention and focus more on the policy issues, because that's where, that's what's holding back the business from a macroeconomic perspective. So it makes sense to actually focus on that. And it seems from, we were actually discussing it a couple of weeks ago that, the Prof. Mtuli came through with some changes in terms of the regulations, removing some red tape and removing some fees and penalties, and lowering the cost of doing business. And that initiative came from noises that were being made, frankly, by the business community through the CZI and other groupings. So I think this is, it's not just a talk show. The conversations that we have here about policy will actually move the needle. The policymakers seem to pay attention to what we have to say and actually act on it.
Yeah, and to the greater audience, I must say, Sekai, after that, the small clip went viral. There were lots of people who didn't even know what CZI was, let alone who the president is and who the CEO is. And you articulated a number of issues that are very close to their hearts. And a lot of people are in the informal sector. And these are issues that they deal with, every day. So, kudos to you. And let's hope that this goes viral again, because we want to talk about sustainability. Yes. What does that actually mean for businesses when we say that we are operating in this environment, but we need to be cognizant of sustainability, whether it's environment, whether it's social, whether it's governance? Could you just really maybe expand on that and speak to our audience and to the policymakers as well?
Thanks for that. I think I'll first react to Rufaro that, the question that policymakers are going to ask us now is, okay, when we are done with regulatory reform and all the reforms that are needed on the policy side, are you going to fly the following morning? Do we have everything in place? So it is our responsibility to also nudge business to address some of the areas that need to be addressed. And sustainability is one of them, because it will future-proof your business, and it will give you the resilience that you need to run that business in an uncertain future, and maybe in a certain future as far as climate change is concerned, because that is well predicted and well documented. So basically what we are trying, and it is really basically a factor of competitiveness. And I say this because of the way that it affects your access to capital, your access to markets, and your relationship with society. And also on the legislative front, it also gives you the legal right to operate if you address sustainability. Why I say this is because if you don't address sustainability, while of course there are policy positions to address emissions, to address the various elements of environmental management, you will find yourself in a place where you cannot comply with a certain regulation, and that will impede your own operation. That will impede your own operations as a business. So in sustainability, what we are trying to do is to make our business leaders realize that they can embed sustainability in their business strategy, and it is not just about reporting. And we have seen that there's been a lot of focus on the reporting. So if you see when the different standards we released for the banks, for the listed entities and others we have been reporting voluntarily, it was mainly focusing on the reporting side, but not so much on how you embed this in strategy and how you create a business case for sustainability in your business model.
Okay. That's very interesting. And let's speak to the informal sector. What does sustainability mean for them? And why should they be concerned about it?
You are asking me a very difficult question because of a sector that I'm not I'm not very ready to talk about in terms of sustainability. So if you look at informal, not necessarily as illegal, but as infancy in business, I think what sustainability then means to them, if they are informal simply because they have not yet formalized and they are on their way to formalization, they are just an infant entity. They are also faced with different kinds of risks in the environment, which could be climatic and which could be otherwise. And because of size, they're usually quite small. You find that they probably don't have much resources to address some of those particular risks. And I believe that cooperation between smaller businesses and larger businesses in managing some of those risk factors in the environment would also assist the informal sector or the informal businesses that are still infant businesses.
Okay. And how do we convince the bean counters? It's always very difficult to convince the bean counters to put a budget to anything. But how do we convince them that this is good for the shareholders, that this is good for our stakeholders and everybody else? How do we ensure that the big businesses actually put a budget to sustainable projects?
So I'll give a few examples. One of them is secularity. So when you secularize your business, you are definitely going to realize more value that you were not realizing because you are probably reusing and recycling, and that may reduce the cost of inputs into your business because you are reusing certain elements. And it may also create new products out of circularity because you are not throwing away anything. So what you would have ordinarily considered as waste, you are now going to use it to make a product that then also gives the business revenue. So that's one proposition that the bin counters would understand. The other one is on energy efficiency. If you look at energy efficiency as a sustainability initiative in your organization, you're definitely going to save money. Why? Because you're going to reduce the energy intensity per unit of production, and that reduces your costs. That makes you more competitive, and you can make savings on your electricity bills. And also, if you in the conference next week, one of the local companies here, BICC Kafka, I think it's the only company in the country that has attained ISO 5001 on energy efficiency. And they've got real bottom line gains to demonstrate. And they're going to be sharing that experience with others as well.
Tell us, because you wear two hats, you are a bean counter, or just at the beginning you were a bean counter,
Yep.
but you're also an analyst. When you're looking at it from investors and shareholders' perspective, what Sekai is saying, does it actually hold water? Do you think that she's
Yeah, so I think
there's evidence to support what she's saying?
For sure, there's evidence. I think for a long time, the sustainability narrative got a bad rap in the business community because it was seen as basically an additional cost to doing business. But the world has changed. So if you look at energy, for example, and you look at renewables like solar, the cost per watt from solar is actually cheaper than any other source of electricity. So this wasn't true 20, 30 years ago. So 20, 30 years ago, if you were going renewable, you're basically increasing your costs. But if you go renewable today, you're actually lowering your costs, and it's actually better for your bottom line. And so I think that's an area where perhaps the advocacy has often come short because it's seen as doing good, but not necessarily profitable. And I think the world we live in today is a world in which sustainability is no longer a dirty word from an accounting perspective because it actually it's good for your bottom line.
Yeah, there's a bit of goodwill. I'd like what everyone is saying, and I know we're running out of time. So maybe just to conclude, let's talk because you did talk about the ecosystem. Let's talk directly to the policymakers. What are the ingredients that they need to know? What do they need to hear more of, and what do they need to do more of to ensure that the ecosystem is sustainable and it is profitable for the stakeholders and everybody else in the market?
To be honest, I think the policymakers have done more than business has done in terms of putting together the right policy instruments, making the several commitments that are there. We do have a few glitches, that probably need business and government to work together. in a transitional manner. So in order for us to reach some of the targets that we've set for ourselves, we probably need to work together towards a target. So we need to allow ourselves a transition to certain thresholds of emissions that we may have. I'll give you an example of the coal that we have in Zimbabwe. So the coal that we have from Wange, which is still used in some of our boilers, does have a certain level of a chemical that I have forgotten. But you are penalized for that threshold. But there is no coal in the country that doesn't have that. So how do we create a transitional mechanism to actually get to the desired maybe phasing out of coal? I'm happy that there are now new technologies like solar heat collectors, for example, that could replace coal heating in the boilers, particularly in the manufacturing sector. So one of the ways would be, can policymakers give incentives for investments in such, in solar heat collectors that are replacing coal, because then you're contributing to the reduction of emissions for the country as a whole. But basically, I think what we need to be able to do is to work together, government and business, so that we create our own transition. So there's a global transition where we have global targets that we have set, which we domesticate into local targets that we set. We also need a transition mechanism where policy and business practice, where policy and practice can work together until we reach the desired targets that we have put in place. But I would like to talk about the rest of the conference, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
That so next week. No. First, I think I learned a new thing today from Sophia about the licenses. There are 4 licenses that she said sustainability gives your business. One, it gives you a social license, it gives you a capital license, and it gives you a market license, and it gives you a legal license. Okay. Because the legal license, particularly because standards are legislated. So if you don't comply, you don't.
We will have a conversation. Yeah. We'll have a conversation with Sophia, and we'll get into this.
So details. We do have.
So you can just talk about the conference. Yeah.
So part of the conference next week is we do have 3 key sessions. The first one is on futures and scenarios and systems thinking approaches to business strategy, and it's going really to talk to how we do strategy powered by foresight tools, more than the static, maybe backward looking and competition looking, but really imagining what the future is bringing and trying to drive innovation, because that would drive more innovation. And then we do have also sessions. So we have a masterclass in the morning like we had today. And then in the afternoon, we do have companies that have actually used foresight to inform strategy, to reposition their organizations. BAT is one of them that is going to share how they've pivoted in their business based on foresight. Then we do have BICC Kafka, of course, with their energy efficiency. And we have TSL as well, a very diversified company. And we do have, on the second day, we have AI for business. And on AI, it's not a technical session. It's really a strategy session. How do you put in place an AI implementation strategy and plan for your business so that we can locate AI at a strategic level and equip companies to begin to implement? And we are also implementing a pilot project with the facilitators with one of the companies, one of the local companies, and that will kick off at that point as well. And we do have a showcase of some of the AI and digitech tools that have been developed locally, but that are being deployed in Zimbabwe and beyond. So we have XPlug, which is a tech company of NMB that has done brilliant work. And we have Escrow. We do have quite an interesting lineup there. And then I think
I'm excited already.
Yeah, finally, we have an entrepreneurship ecosystem forum, because we do have an ecosystem for entrepreneurship development in Zimbabwe, but it is disconnected. So we are just creating a forum where the actors themselves can constantly share some of what they are doing, and then deliberately connect the different elements that would support the entrepreneurs more. So we do have a proposed ecosystem design proposal that is going to be presented, and a lot of interesting discussions. And Mutapa, the Mutapa factor in anchoring Zimbabwe's private sector and industrial development. They are going to tell us what the Mutapa portfolio can actually do to revitalize industry.
Oh, fantastic!
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
I was just thinking, if you look at some of the businesses that we're involved in, we've managed to raise money from Europe, from the US, and more social impact is a big thing.
Yep.
And more for finance to actually come to Africa, there are a lot of, boxes you have to tick. And it's not just a box ticking exercise. You have to actually demonstrate that you're doing something and it's real and it's sustainable. So what I was actually thinking of is how important it is for Zimbabwe business to really wake up to the reality of what finance, the international world is looking at, and how finance, and because we're always talking about raising money and raising finance, and that maybe this is the missing leg, which is impact finance.
Yes.
That if we can demonstrate that this is, how far the money that we're raising can impact society in whatever form, and it's actually sustainable. What are your thoughts on that?
There's quite a lot, actually.
If you're knocking on doors in New York or in London, and
actually, from an African perspective, there's a lot of money that is, termed social capital, the likes of the Gates Foundation, for example. So they're not necessarily looking for a aggressive return. So if it's debt equity, the interest rates are going to be really low. It'll be cheap. And to the extent that they're looking for equity, again, they're not going to be aggressive like an investor seeking a high return, because what they care about is
the impact.
Is the impact. And sustainability is one of the themes. Green energy is one of the themes. And if you're a business in a country like Zimbabwe and you want to raise money in global markets, that is low hanging fruit. It actually makes much more sense for you to get that kind of capital than regular capital.
Okay. All right. The producer's just telling us that we're going on, and this tends to happen when we have you on the show. But thank you very much for inviting us. Thank you very much to Delta for sponsoring CZI.
Cheers.
And cheers.